Hey everyone, welcome to the Farmers Cup. We're going to start here for the first panel. To get this kicked off, I was going to introduce today Daniel Hendricks here. A little known fact about Daniel, he was born in Humboldt County right on the soil in his backyard. That's where they say his roots started growing instantly that day and the passion for cannabis started then. Daniel started in the cannabis industry back in 1996 at the ripe age of 14, and he really knew that plant genetics was the way to go in this industry and to really save the cultivars of the industry. In 2010, Daniel ended up opening up a software company and was a top 4 rated game designer, and he ended up selling that company and moving on back to the cannabis industry in 2014. In 2014, he was working with Daisies Incorporated, working on their grow and expanding that business. He took the business from a small company up into 4 times revenue in over a couple year period. After that, he ended up starting Hendricks Farm, where he does his cultivars and saving the genetic strains of yesterday and actually improving scientifically the strains of today. He's been acknowledged by all sorts of things, Leafly, High Cups, High Times Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Cannabis Terpene Magazine, Skunk Magazine, Cannabis Science Conference, CanMed, to say just a few. He has more acclamations than I know what to say. Daniel's also still up in Humboldt County today, and he's glad to be here, and he's going to introduce his panel next.
Awesome, thank you. I'll try not to shout. I tend to have a loud voice, so if, signal to me if this is just gets shrill. Thank you, Josh, with iCal Labs. Really appreciate it. Josh does great work. He does a lot of testing for cannabis here in California, extracts, and really ethical, honest work. So he's doing some work right now with the Humboldt Legacy Project, exploring volatile sulfur compounds for some legacy skunk. So thank you. Appreciate it. I appreciate you coming. Welcome to the Farmers Cup. So it'll be a fun event. We got sun, San Diego, ganja, so enjoy it. Mingle, get to know everybody. We're all friends and peers and looking forward to chatting with everybody. This legacy group, amazing crew right here. Yeah. This is just getting to, talk with everybody and reacclimate. I kind of got to recognize this is the full representation of like Emerald Triangle referencing right here. And it really stoked. Yeah, that wasn't, I don't even think the plan, but now looking at each other and just kind of doing the landscape, this is Emerald Triangle. So I'm going to start by introducing the group here. This is Joseph with Emerald Spirit Botanicals. Joseph and Emerald Spirit Botanicals are known for their rare cannabinoid breeding. Their popular strain, Pink Boost Goddess, is high THCV. They have CBDV strains, amazing minor cannabinoids, and amazing breeding. They're in the Mendocino region. So this is one corner of our triangle right here. Next is Jerry Savage with Savage Farms. Jerry's in Humboldt County in the Whitethorn region. He owns both Savage Farms and Sohum Seeds. And Sohum Seeds is a big legacy breeding nursery that has been around for a long time. So Jerry does a lot of important work, both providing flower and genetics to the community. This is Susie with Avoca. Avoca is a farm in the, thank you, in the Mendocino area. They represent the Boone Valley Cooperative of Farms there, and Anderson Valley, and Mendocino. So another corner, pillar. We've got Mendocino, Humboldt, Mendocino. Next is Laura Lee with Sunrise Mountain Farms. So Laura Lee is in the Willow Creek region, and so for those who don't know, Humboldt County is a huge geographical county with like a small population, very rural, and so Laura Lee and next Craig with Talking Tree Farms, they're both in the Willow Creek area, really amazing part of the county, which is so different than where Jerry is at in Humboldt. Next is Lorien. Lorien is in Trinity County. So Trinity County, the third county of our Emerald Triangle pillar there. She has an amazing history all over the country. We're going to get to hear all of their stories and their gossip. And last is Ted with Canna Country Farms. Ted is in Humboldt County, not too far from Jerry, but a long drive. When you're going a short distance in Humboldt County, it may only say a couple of miles, but that means windy dirt roads and one-lane roads and fallen trees, and hope you bring your chainsaw in the winter to get home. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm just going to kind of dig in a little bit, try to keep it pretty casual, and just talk through, get folks to tell some of their stories. I kind of want to walk through maybe like the history of cannabis for the timeline, because as the legacy panel, these stories start before I was born, and they like lead up into today, and we think this is still the beginning of the story. So we're going to reach back as far as we can and try to just kind of casually walk through our history here. So I got to know Lorien really this week with some really cool stories, and she kind of she's got great history with dual citizenship in Canada and in the US, and has a really interesting story of kind of what brought her to the Canadian area. Is that feedback from the speaker? Why don't you come on down and sit in the hot seat?
Okay.
See if that works better.
Oh, still a little bit. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Maybe, if it doesn't work, we will move it to the middle or
Okay.
something. So you got to live both like in Canada and experience here in the U.S. Like the cannabis movement is like a counterculture, and when it started for all the people on this panel, and what we want you guys to hear about is that counterculture. So what brought you to Canada, and what started your journey into the cannabis world?
So my father is from San Diego. He was an Air Force brat. My grandfather was in the Air Force. And he, when he graduated high school in 1969, the news coming back from Vietnam wasn't looking so pretty. So when he was drafted into Vietnam, he decided to continue with his plan to head to Europe, which eventually took him to India, Afghanistan. We'll talk about that a little later. Back to Europe, back to Afghanistan and India, and then finally to Africa, where he was turned in to the draft board and ended up having to leave with my brother as a baby and his partner at the time, and moved to Canada, to British Columbia, where they were given safe haven and were able to live, with his young family. He ended up settling on the Gulf Islands, which was another like big place, the west coast of Canada, similar to California. Was a big back to the land, homesteader movement there as well. So then a few years later, I was born. So that's the Canada story.
Yeah, and the reason I asked her to set that stage is because, so much of the cannabis community, where it originated from in terms of, during this prohibition era, meant that people left where they were and found safe haven in these pockets and communities that followed certain values and certain beliefs. Jerry, for instance, this question could be great for both Jerry or Ted, honestly. Jerry, tell us about what brought your family to Humboldt County, and maybe the first times that you saw the cannabis plant.
We moved to Humboldt in '77. I remember the first time I was picking leaves, and I got in trouble for dropping a water line on the plant and split the plant in half, so that one stuck. And that was my first connection with the plant.
How old were you, Jerry?
7 in '77.
7 and 77, yeah. So your mom is the person who introduced you to cannabis. How would you feel like who first introduced you to cannabis?
She was breeding way back then, and she was known for her strains, and so yeah, I grew up with it. It was always all around.
Yeah. So Ted, it's actually interesting. I didn't know that I'd talk about this, but Ted, similar. When was the first age? Who first introduced you to cannabis? What did those plants look like?
I was about 13 years old in northern Mendocino County, and I'm going to sit over here. My mom was the first one to show me the plant. It was we had a garden. We were part of the Back to Land movement in this 1969. My parents moved to Leggett in northern Mendocino, and had a farm. You know, had plants, had garden to grow all your veggies. Well, my parents both were blue collar. They both worked jobs every day, and they had their garden, and they didn't really need to grow herb, but they loved it, and they had a couple in their garden, and that's when I was introduced to it. The first time I saw it was in our vegetable garden, and I'm helping my mom pull weeds and water, and I'm like, what's that? And she explained to me what it was, and that was like, that comes from that little tiny seed, and it's this giant plant, and just as a kid, it blew my mind, and just immediately wanted to take care of it, and that's where I am today.
What did the Back to Land movement represent? Like, what does that mean to people that don't know? Like, does that mean, what does that mean for your lifestyle?
That means my parents were kind of looking for something different than the city life. And my dad was in the military, and after the military, he got out. He wanted to go get some land, and met my mom, and they came up to Leggett. They looked for land. They bought land. They got jobs, and they started raising a family.
Yeah. What about farming from a perspective that just isn't just cannabis? Where food. What was it like? Where does your guys' water come from?
Yeah, it wasn't all about cannabis. Cannabis was a new introduction at the time. It was more about eating your own vegetables, growing your own food, surviving on the land, not spending a bunch of money, trash, garbage, whatever, being part of the government deal. And so my parents just want to get away from all that, get up in the hills, grow their own, be self-sufficient. And our water came from springs straight out of the ground.
Totally. Since I wanted you to tell the group that, and what I also think is very common with what Lorian's experience is it's counterculture. We at one point our parents, our leadership, removed themselves from kind of this mainstream culture to look for something different and try to pave their own path, and that meant choosing a harder path. Water from the ground, vegetables from the earth, mill your own lumber and build your own homes. And that is the culture that started this movement that we all get to benefit from now. So, draft dodger era, this is like stuff that strikes us to our core, the Back to the Land movement of the 70s. And cannabis is maybe not even at that point, probably emerging. The 70s culture says maybe we do want to embrace this. Maybe we want to embrace like a freer thinking, but...
Well, that was the time when it became something more. You're like, wait a minute, I could sell this for like $500? And this is going to pay for all our groceries and everything. Like, it finally dawned on everybody that it was worth something, and then it became part of the culture,
right?
Because it was literally putting food on our table that we couldn't grow.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it seemed like it gained popularity, because there's nothing in the winter to do where we're at. It's kind of like a seasonal job, and so if you could grow enough herb in the summer to last all winter, you were golden. So.
Right. It wasn't. The Emerald Triangle formation wasn't. People didn't go to the hills to go grow pot. they went to the hills to go have a cultural experience with the earth and with the community. And all of a sudden, this spirit of freedom and free thinking, the plants started to grow around us, and the culture started to form around, honestly, this group. I feel like I am, I'm not young, but I am still learning from the people that built this community what it's supposed to be to represent Humboldt, represent the Humboldt Triangle, and represent the culture. So I'm going to jump now to Joseph, and I am doing this kind of trying to go through the history of how the plant has progressed. So Joseph, can you share the first time that you grew pot, the first time you got to see plants growing, and maybe what year that was, what the culture was like for you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking a moment to listen to our stories here. So my name is Joseph with Emerald Spirit Botanicals, and one of the first times that I really grew cannabis on my own, it was a really fascinating story. I was going to school at UC Santa Cruz, studying sustainable agriculture and green building design. And I had grown a plant with my parents in high school. That was my first experience with cannabis. But going to the university, I really wanted to continue this tradition and learn more about this plant. Being at the university was tough because you're in a small space and you can't really grow cannabis. So I went out into the forest and I found a tree that I could climb to the top of, and I had 6 plants that were in pots that I had secured to the tops of the trees. I then, as I was doing this, I noticed that when I would water the plants, that water would drip down through the pots. So I built a rainwater catchment system underneath the pots and inoculated them with an effective microorganism so that I had a compost tea that was collecting the water from the pots, and it helped to also act as a sort of canopy to protect people, to prevent people from seeing it when they looked up. So it doubled as decoy, but also collecting my water to act as a ferment. I was able to grow these 6 plants. Each one harvested about an ounce. It was very small. But that really, for me, was a major moment when I realized that this cannabis plant is something special, and that I was going to be committing my life to bringing forward high-quality medicine for people. And now we do that through Farm Cut and Emerald Spirit Botanicals.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a story that other people, but in Humboldt, the idea in the Emerald Triangle, the idea of growing plants in trees, it's like almost everybody. Joseph has the actual story of getting to do it, but everybody knows that story of being so, trying to disguise what we're doing so much that we were willing to, hike several miles into the woods, build baskets in trees, water lines running through trees, all on natural spring water. Joseph actually did that.
So I was actually backpacking the water up to the plants. I would fill up a couple water bottles into my backpack, and I would climb the tree with that. And that was how I was bringing the water to the plants. Every other day, you had to go at night because you couldn't be seen. So this was in darkness. You had to climb one tree and then cross branches to the other tree to climb to the top, because I wanted to be in a tree that you couldn't access branches from the base. So this was very well thought out, but really, it produced a really nice sun-grown flower. It was above the major forest canopy, so it got good light, and was the way to be discreet.
And so, I think Joseph was in Santa Cruz area, and Santa Cruz also just a really, nearly the Emerald Triangle. I think that all of California has these pockets and these countercultures, all of the world does, where, people start to see things differently and they start to group together and try to find a community that, believes in the plant and believes in the medicine. And I'm going to maybe go to Susie next. So, Susie, where are you from? The whole world, the whole country, is seeing the value of this cannabis plant, and it's starting to travel around the world. where are you at, and what first brings you to cannabis?
Hi. Well, I was born and raised in Tennessee, and I had two adolescent daughters and decided that I needed to provide them with a better alternative. For a lot of reasons, I'm not going to list all of them here today. And so we moved to Northern California, and I went with the intention of homesteading and growing food and medicine. I was an herbalist already, and really didn't think about cannabis being something I could grow. And as soon as I realized I could, I haven't stopped since, and that's been 16 years. So, and then, thank you, yeah. And it's been an amazing gift to me. You know, that plant has provided so much for all of us, and for you guys too. So, yeah.
So you said that you came out to help provide for your daughters and find a new lifestyle. What were you able to do with the cannabis plant that helped you to achieve that and provide for your daughters?
Well, it was interesting because we're entering into the high school zone, and I had to start thinking about the kids stealing the cannabis. So I decided to focus on making the clones, the baby plants. And so I kind of became the clone lady and had a handful of dispensaries in the East Bay and took my clones around, and yeah, and it just became enough to really, provide for us and help assist. Yep.
So, I'm trying to get us to establish a little bit of a timeline, and I'm going to fudge it a little bit, but, the Back to Land movement, the leaving of the counterculture and trying to run from it, that's the beginning. And then kind of the plant starts to follow, and the culture starts to form, and the opportunity starts to arise, and people start finding trees to grow in and remote places to grow this plant in small crops. So 1996 in California, the Compassionate Care Act passed and allowed cannabis to be considered medicine for the first time. And I was a freshman in high school when that happened, and it just seemed like, okay, Humboldt is Emerald Triangle. We're very close to a culture that allows access to this new medical freedom. And so the business starts to build. And so 96, we start to see maybe a little, not like brazen freedoms, but that's when people start to take a little bit more risk and say, this is medicine. We're willing to put our freedom at risk. The value of the plant is high, and it incentivizes to grow small crops, work extremely hard for them, carry water up the tree in order to water the plants. So we're starting to see the whole world change. Susie from Tennessee is able to come to California, and lo and behold, what is happening here in California? And she's able to establish a legal business providing plants and allowing other people to farm it, within our dispensary medical community freedoms that we had then. I'm going to go to Craig next. Okay, so Craig has an amazing story. I actually was totally fan-struck the first time I met Craig because he has this amazing company, Satori, which represents to me, skate culture and hemp and just all the things that, like, the best of legal cannabis. What was it like, Craig, for you getting to first build cannabis into your business plan, and what did it mean to you to build Satori?
So I grew up in Georgia, so as soon as I turned 18, I headed to California, which is 1996. So I landed in San Francisco right as Dennis Perone and all the guys that were the proponents of Prop 215. So I kind of just dove right into that culture. And so I started growing cannabis indoor in 97 in San Francisco. Me and a buddy got an apartment. It was a one-bedroom apartment. We put up 4 lights in the bedroom and slept in the living room. And back then, I don't even think carbon filters were on the market yet. So, we were just stinking up the neighborhood every 3 months. And it was fun, but it was also real nerve-wracking, not knowing. It wasn't fully legit yet. It was late 2000s before it became you could just grow and be okay. So it was pretty fun. but interesting. And so at the same time, 1998, a buddy and I started Satori Skate Wheels, and we were just kind of eco-minded, environmentally focused type of people. And so our goal was to try and develop a recycled skateboard wheel, which we wind up doing like 10 years later. And at that same time, when we were looking at making T-shirts and clothing, we wanted to focus on trying to do organic and hemp products. Mind you, in '98, like there wasn't really any internet, there wasn't like Google, so like finding these products and sourcing them was like a whole different ball game. And basically, it was sourced by being in the community and meeting people, and then just kind of establishing those relationships that are still intact today. You know, I've done business with some of the same people for 26 years now, and yeah, it's wild. You know, from sending faxes and making rotary phone calls to now everything's web-based. It's been quite the evolution.
Yeah, so awesome. You know, Craig's company Satori is a hemp company. You know, and for me, growing up, counterculture, skate culture is one of those countercultures. And so, you know, I heard this term in like when you own a bar, you know, you want to curate a safe space, you know, one that like means that people of all backgrounds can come in and feel safe and feel like they're not going to be harassed. And I think that like the skate culture provided that for a lot of people with that, you know, maybe wanted to, you know, get into ganja, felt like they weren't quite maybe misunderstood isn't the right word, but like it was a counterculture and a freedom and a place of acceptance, you know.
Oh, big time. You would just look at someone's shoes. If they had Airwalks or back then even Vans, like that's your friend. It doesn't matter who they were, anything about them. If they had a skateboard or skateboard shoes, you guys were buddies.
Yeah, I didn't. My first time ever smoking pot, my buddy brought some pot back from Reggae on the River. I was 12, and we skateboarded like 3 miles to get like this relative freedom to smoke pot. So you're right. Yeah, the shoes were a dead give in. Like this person's safe. And so Satori and Talking Trees, Satori is now a dispensary where you can buy legal cannabis. And yeah, that brings me back to that starstruck moment is when I met Craig and my, you know, Hendrix plants were going to be at Craig's dispensary. I was like, this is the guy who owns Satori. Like, this is the big effing deal. And yeah, thank you for like sharing that part of the culture. You know, just to prod a little bit, you know, the 90s, it was prohibition. You were, I know what it's like to grow indoor without a carbon filter, and it's completely nerve-wracking and almost borderline idiotic. Did it ever get you into any trouble? Has the plant you ever found yourself in jail because of the plant?
Yeah, I've been arrested a few times, mostly being on the road. I never actually got arrested for cultivation. I got a close call in San Francisco. I was having my daughter, and so we shut down the grow room, and literally like a week later, I had some undercover cops knock on the door and be like, I had a complaint that you were growing cannabis in here. I was like, no, I'm not. Come on in and walk through. So that was a really close call, like in terms of cultivation. I've had a couple close calls out on the hills. When permitting was about to start, they had this thing called the wet team. And they came in pretty hot and heavy to my property, and they didn't like seeing like 2,000 plants. And so that was, you know, I had to hire an attorney and a private investigator like right away. So that was kind of interesting. But the first time I got arrested was in '99, day before Halloween. You know, I was not even 25 yet. I didn't have a car, so my friend who was 25 in San Francisco would rent a car for me for one day. I would drive up to Humboldt, get 2 pounds or whatever I could afford, and then drive them down to San Francisco and you know, parcel them out. This particular time I was with a friend. He had Georgia plates. He had dreadlocks. We'd been smoking weed. I was asleep in the back seat, but we got pulled over for going 6 miles over the speed limit. And what I would call the gauntlet, it's like this one downhill area when you're going through Ukiah, and it goes to 55 miles an hour. Everybody on this up here probably knows exactly where I'm talking about. And yeah, so I got arrested. I had no idea what Ukiah was. I just knew Arcata to San Francisco. And so wound up in jail for the weekend. And I didn't have my 215 card then, so I got it immediately after that happened. And with Dr. Todd Mikaria, who was kind of like a legend in writing the first 215s. And then, so I actually got those charges dropped. And then again in 2004 in Orange County, I got pulled over. Again, had some pounds, got arrested, charges got dropped. So my arrest experiences weren't too bad, but yeah, it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, I've been arrested, for pot before, and it's not a good feeling. That's the biggest relief for me with this whole legalization movement. Honestly, it was when COVID happened, and it looked like they were going to shut down dispensaries and ganja, and then all of a sudden, the state of California said, "No, you're agricultural, you're essential," and that was probably the only time I got a little teared up because, like, for the first time ever, it was not prohibition. Like, I always felt so much stress driving with pot, and that, like, my stress went away that day, at least for that moment, because I got to be on the road, and the only thing that made it legal for me to be on the road was the fact that I did have marijuana in the car. And that was just really exciting. It was exciting being part of the community that had to look out for our employees and worry about our the health and safety of our employees in just a very public way. So yeah, it was really exciting. It sucks to get arrested. Don't drive. Don't ride dirty. Watch out. Be careful riding dirty.
Yeah. Well, about COVID was actually pretty amazing because where my dispensary is, a bar had just opened up a month before, like COVID happened. So it was wild to see that the bar had to be closed, but we could be open and provide cannabis to people. So to see that shift and that irony was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I worked all through COVID, and everybody here did. COVID did not slow us down. It definitely seemed like we had to be there, and it was really nice being out on these farms during COVID. If anybody here hasn't been to Humboldt, get in the car, set it on your schedule, and come visit right away, because the experience of going to a cannabis farm, being in nature, it's just so different than anything you've ever experienced, and it will change your life. Maybe I should go to Lauralee now, and Lauralee can tell us a little bit about what it's looks like on a cannabis farm. Where is Sunrise Mountain Farm? What kind of area is that like?
Okay, yeah, Sunrise Mountain Farm is in the northeast corner of Humboldt County, up in the mountains, and there's conifer forest surrounding. That's quite different than southern Humboldt. I started growing in southern Humboldt 25 years ago, and it's a little bit more open down there. So I've been growing cannabis in Willow Creek area for about 20 years. And growing outdoor is just amazing because you can grow plants in their full glory. So you can grow them up really large rather than just all small kind of plants in greenhouses or whatever. But the plants see the sunrise every morning. There's fresh spring water that they're fed every day. They're rooted down into living soil, and we do soil building practices so that the soil is just like this amazing ecosystem that's feeding the plants, and the plants are thriving and they're so healthy outdoors because these plants are in their element. These cannabis plants, all plants have been growing outdoors under the sunlight for thousands of years and evolving that way. And this is they can come into their full fruition that way. And so we have microorganisms and fungi, and all these relationships are happening in the soil.
Yeah, and you guys do a really good job, and everybody on this panel, we could have this conversation with everybody, but I'm gonna have it with you. Where do the inputs that go into the plant? Like, you guys use a lot of the natural surroundings that you guys have on the farm to help do your soil building. Can you talk about soil building a little bit?
We do, yeah. On our farm, we're doing some regenerative farming practices, permaculture. My husband is the main cultivator now, and he's learned about jadam farming, natural farming, and Korean natural farming. So we take vegetables and fruits and we ferment them. We wildcraft things that are growing on our farm. So horsetail, we'll harvest horsetail usually in May, right around this time of year. And we make a ferment out of that, and we feed that to our plants, and it gives them silica, which is great helps with preventing powdery mildew. It helps build cellular walls, and so we use natural things in our environment like blackberries and horsetail and St. John's wort, and we ferment these things, fish, all kinds of things. So we have recipes, and we make our own nutrients. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the knowledge that it takes just to grow the plant and to grow it the way that, to influence it and to see the way we grow it change and evolve over this course of time, from the 70s until now. There's been an entire evolution that brings us as far back to the beginning as possible. I think that, like, when we started, we were all, enjoying the freedom of the rural community, growing these small plants, using natural inputs, and it scaled. And to develop those processes to scale a relatively small commercial, but it's a lot to manage, several thousand square feet of ganja, and to employ those like small craft practices at what is still a very small farm, but in a way that we can produce it for the community to enjoy is really difficult. And it takes your entire team's focus. So, Laura Lee and Jerry and Ted are on the farm. Susie is on the farm making this flour, and it takes the whole community to get that flour out of these rural regions and across the country. I want to go back to Lorian and kind of go back in time a little bit. So picture us, Emerald Triangle, recluses up in the woods, totally pulled back from society. We need some innovative risk takers to figure out, where is this pot supposed to go? And Lorian, which is why I asked her to set the stage, in Canada. Tell us the story of, maybe BC Bud, what it meant for you and how you interacted, helping getting cannabis from the rural community, out to the people who need it.
So I moved to California from Canada when I was 5. I grew up in Santa Barbara. But then I went back to school in Washington State, and while I was in school in Washington, I would hitchhike up the peninsula, take a ferry to the islands, and trim for some of my friends that I grew up with on the islands. And during that time, there was a pretty big price discrepancy between Canada. This was right in the beginning of Prop 215. Pretty big price discrepancy between the cannabis and weed being grown in Canada and being grown stateside. And there were a lot of people doing various, smuggling methods to get it across the border. There were people driving vans and trucks. And some of my friends were sailing. So the island where I'm from, there's a continuous island chain that is bisected by the Canadian-US border. So in between, it's a short kayak ride between Vancouver Island, or the Canadian islands, to the American islands, the San Juans. So I started picking up kayaks for these friends of mine that were kayaking across, bringing stuffing like 80 pounds of weed and vacuum bags and dry bags into their kayak. And I would go drive onto San Juan Island, go to the beach at 5 o'clock in the morning. They'd bring a kayak up. I'd strap it to the roof of my little, I had like a 87 Nissan 300ZX sports car, cherry red. So I'd like strap this red kayak to the roof of my red Z car, like with T-tops. It was ridiculous. But I just, I want to start out by saying that like I took a lot of risks, but they were calculated based on my experience in the world and how I was treated, right? So just acknowledging my immense privilege in all of this, that I was able to do a lot of like hiding in plain sight, right? And not everyone had that privilege in that time. So, prohibition, being white, being upper middle class, being a female it made a lot of that kind of skirting through borders and boundaries much easier for me. But eventually, these guys were really dropping the ball, right? They'd leave me sitting on the beach waiting for them for hours. There's all kinds of, disorganization happening. So I ended up meeting someone with a captain's license, and we started running sailboats. So I had my friend who I used to trim for, who now has a successful cannabis brand based in BC called Island Magic. And but I had him going around to all of his friends, people we know all over the islands, and buying out their like 10, 20 lighters of like People's AAA Indoor. It was all craft, small family growers, and basically buying all the weed from all these kids that I had grown up with that were all growers. There was a big cannabis culture on the west coast of BC, and buying people's outdoor in season and their indoor, bringing it to Seattle. And then my partner and I ended up getting together with an attorney, so I had good legal advice. Maybe here in the audience. And my partner and I ended up trucking it from Seattle to Chicago and New York. And at one point, the funny part about it was that at one point, my dad, the one who had draft dodged and ended up in BC, kind of asked me like, hey, like, it doesn't really seem like this lawyer that you're with is really like doing a lot of legal work. Like, what are you really doing? Like, you tell me your stories, I'll tell you mine. And it came out that all those trips across, like from Afghanistan to Europe, he was smuggling hash welded into the frame of his Land Rover. And it turns out also my grandfather was like a bootlegger as well. So apparently I'm like third generation smuggler.
Yeah, right on. Thank you.
Runs in the family. But, lots of crazy things happened. At one point, I got pulled over at the border bringing cash across. It launched an investigation. They held me overnight while they counted the cash. They had $300,000. They let me go, kept the cash, and we tried to go to court for it. We tried to go after it and claim that it was for a tribunal, a NAFTA tribunal to challenge a hemp case, where the feds had seized trucks of hemp bound for the Body Shop, actually, like hemp products, when was it? The hemp case? Early 2000s. This was all like 2003, 2004, right? So the judge ruled against us and called our evidence implausible and bordering on the absurd. That was on the front page of the Canada National Post. So, my Canadian extended family got to see that. It was, pretty exciting.
Thank you for.
Yeah.
I love that, bordering on absurd. I would love to that's an Instagram post. Is like your mugshot in the paper with like bordering on absurd. I would love to be able to post something like that. And I like the way this has come together because we're reclusive. It wasn't a criminal enterprise. It was just kind of these people, individuals that made this whole cannabis movement happen, and it was just insightful of you. Can you tell that story about what made you say, I can do this myself, and I can't trust the people I'm working with to be intelligent as I am?
Well, so the crack story.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the guys that I was picking up kayaks, they were, they were like basically coming across with these kayaks, and I would pick them up and bring them to Seattle and like load them up in, I had a freight elevator, load them, unload the kayaks into duffel bags, and then like drive them to the basement of an Asian supermarket in Tacoma and like unload into like, 4 Asian dudes in suits and a Lexus, like unload into their trunk. And it was pretty, it was like, it was a little hardcore. Everyone was always respectful and nice. And I think, one of the things about the traditional market was we did really play by like some pretty hard and fast rules about how we treated people. Not to say that, those rules didn't get broken or you didn't find assholes there in every business, right? But yeah, these guys, one of them actually, the kayaker, ended up like binging crack one night. He got like really addicted to crack, and he didn't show up for 4 or 5 days in a row. And when he did show up, he had passed out in a cave on a private island, like next to a house, with a loaded kayak. And he didn't just have weed, I'll say that much, when he showed up. And I was pissed. I was like, I didn't sign up for this, And at which point I just realized like these dudes, like I could do this way better than them. Like I know I could run this business better than them. Because one thing, I think we could all agree, like you do stuff enough, especially in the black market, especially when we were during Prohibition, like people start to get sloppy. I think that's always where we lost, is like where you break your own rules, you get too comfortable, and we always really had to move like ninjas in the shadows, But you get too comfortable and it becomes normalized, and that's where you slip up and make those mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the difference, this is just a little side, the difference between Northern Humboldt and Southern Humboldt is the Southern Humboldt people know that rule a lot better. They keep quiet, they really like kept to themselves. Jerry and Ted stoically sitting here in the posture that this represents, that, how hard has it been for you, Jerry, to like go through all this and just not say anything? Jerry is the most modest person. He's done so much amazing work. Was it your parents that taught you this, how to operate within this culture?
I think it's growing up in a small community. It's like from the very beginning, you learned to not talk shit about and lying. You were caught. It'd come right back to you really quick. And so I think that was just a small community deal. And I helped build the community center, the Mateel, when I was 18. And that led into a lot of cool relationships, met a lot of cool people, and worked for some cool people. I did construction for years, and it was just cool. Weed was always on the side back then. It wasn't, you could get busted one year, and so it was real hit and miss. But I think it was a community that pretty much made me what I am.
The ganja and the money within ganja is, fabled as, amazing, and, all this money raining from the sky. And in practice, there was a lot less money raining from the sky. There was a lot of confiscations. There was a lot of busts. There was a lot of deals gone wrong.
I had a few close calls, but I made it through without getting busted, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to actually ask Joseph this question. Joseph, do you ever remember a time within your cannabis career where, you felt scared or uncomfortable or just like a deal gone wrong?
Yeah, so there's many close calls that we came across, throughout our lives, but there was one, particular moment that was pretty frightening and also pretty sobering, and kind of realizing, what you had at stake. And this was kind of going into the transition from, I called it the free people's market into the regulated market. And I was really trying to find my way into the regulated market and really make things work, because I believed that the system that we were creating was the path to get medicine into the hands of the people that really needed this medicine. And so I dove headfirst into becoming a legal farm and a licensed farm. There was a little bit of transition that was happening during that time. And so there were, as I started to kind of let go of my Free People's Market connections and transition into the licensed market, there was one person in particular that I think, they knew that I was on my way out and that I was kind of trying to close things up on that end. And on my final deal that I ever did in the Free People's Market, I ended up having the cash bag switched for an identical looking bag that had newspaper cut in the shape of bills. And so that was a really big moment for me to realize that, the trust and the integrity that we had as small community members was something really valuable that was at stake with legalization, because now this welcomed in a whole group of people that really had profit at the front of their minds, and they were going to get that at any expense. And that meant robbing the small farmers of decades of generational work to produce the medicine that we put our heart and souls into. And so to really have that experience and this harsh reminder that, if you don't find the right people out there and you end up getting into a kind of a tricky spot, you could end up with losing everything. And I was lucky enough to not lose my life. And, I know that there were guns, I could tell that they were packing. And so there was part of a little discomfort there as well, to just know that, like, there's very little you can do in those moments.
Yeah. So the part of the story that I don't think came across is, Joseph had not only his crop, but he had other people's crops with him, and he goes to arrange a sale, and not only his crop gets lost, but somebody else's crop gets lost, and Joseph didn't have a handshake deal with that person, let alone anything. And we've all been there, where our friend comes to us and they say, man, I really need this crop to move. Will you do me a favor? And you go to make the deal and something goes wrong. Somebody in the pathway is dishonest and the money gets lost. And without question, Joseph told the story to me the other day. What happened, Joseph?
Yeah, so as soon as I found out that I had been robbed, my first step was, let's get in the car and go see if we can find the vehicle. And I couldn't. And so the next place that I went was to the bank. And I withdrew all the money that I had in the bank so that I could take it back to my friend who his weed had been stolen. On my word, I trusted this person, and so I emptied out my entire savings account to go pay this man back as much as I could. And I think that's something that, thank you. I think that's something that we've lost in legalization, is there's a lot of cutthroat business that's happening, and people just know that they can disrespect this person, blacklist them, and never see them again. And growing up in a small community, we really had each other's backs and we supported each other. There was no contract. There was nothing binding us to follow through with this. It was our own personal reputation on the line. And that's something that it's been hard to find people in the legal cannabis movement that have that level of reputation. And so, I just hope that story can encourage people to really follow through on their word, and follow through on their actions, communicate well, and just do good work together, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all trying to support this plant. We all need to survive. We all need money. But we do this together, and if we all succeed, then we have a better chance of reaching the finish line, holding each other's hands, and seeing this medicine in the right people, with the right people.
If there's one thing that cannabis legacy cannabis represents, is that integrity. And if there's something that people could take home with them from this talk, is that you know, all these people, that's what it represented to them for all those years is like, you know, the money comes second and your word and your honor comes first. And that's what Legacy Cannabis represents to the legacy operators and what we really hope to bring to the legal cannabis market. So support legacy farms, support small farms, you know, support each other. We really appreciate it. So yeah, this is what the journey we went through. We were outdoor, we got chased indoor, and you know, now we're back under the sun like we really want to be, growing out here in the open, and you know, we grow for you guys and we hope you enjoy it. So, does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you so much. There is another panel coming up. Do you know what the next panel is, Lele? So we're going to look even deeper into this topic with the elders that actually were there to tell this story. I know that Leilani Dubois is going to host, and I don't know all the people, but I know Brian Hill has some really amazing stories, so stick around for that. 10 minutes. Great. Thank you, you guys.